Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's presentation on Graduation 101. Tonight's presenters are Kathleen. She will be doing licensure requirements. Davinia, she's from the ADA. She will be talking about protective insurance. Dr. Amazadeh, he will be talking about buying a practice. And Dr. Nguyen, she'll be talking about CE, mentoring, networking, and the journals. And then we'll go into questions and closing remarks. This webinar should last about an hour. And please save your questions for the end of each presentation. You'll be able to ask each presenter after they're done. You can either unmute or type in the chat. And with that, Kathleen can go ahead and start.
All right, let's see if I can get my screen shared here. All right, can everybody see my slides? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about dental licensure in Pennsylvania. So the license that I'm sure everybody is going to be applying for when they graduate dental school is, of course, a dental license. Having a dental license in Pennsylvania means that you're going to actively engage in the practice of dentistry, or you want the ability to legally do so in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In addition to having a dental license, if you plan to administer any type of anesthesia beyond local anesthesia, so that's going to include general anesthesia, deep sedation, conscious sedation, nitrous oxide, IV sedation, anything more than local, you are also going to require an anesthesia permit in the Commonwealth. And there are 3 different permit types: an unrestricted permit, which basically allows you to administer all types of anesthesia; a restricted 1 permit, which is going to allow you to administer conscious sedation or nitrous oxide; and then a restricted 2 permit, which is going to allow you to administer nitrous oxide only. So all dentists in Pennsylvania are going to be required to renew their license every 2 years, beginning in April of the odd number year. So the next renewal is going to actually be taking place in 2025, in March of 2025. And this is going to be for all licensees, regardless of when you actually obtain your license. So even if you don't get your license until, let's just say, January of 2025, you are still going to be required to renew your license by April 1st. Dentists are going to need 30 hours of continuing education to renew their license. They're also going to need a current CPR certification, any certifications that are required for your particular anesthesia permit as well. Within your 30-hour total, you are going to be required to have 2 hours of child abuse continuing education. And then you are also going to be required to have 2 hours of pain management, identification of addiction, or prescribing and dispensing practices if you hold a DEA license. If you have either an unrestricted or a restricted 1 permit, 15 of your required 30 hours must be in anesthesia-related courses. So I had mentioned that regardless of when you obtain your license, you need to renew at the same time as everybody else. If you just obtained your license within the renewal period, you will be exempt from the 30-hour continuing education requirement, with the exception of child abuse continuing education. Everybody must take that every renewal. So how do you apply for a license? So all licensing is done through the PALS system, which is the State Board of Dentistry's online licensing system. That is the only way in which you can apply for a license. The application fee is currently $235, but on July 1st of 2025, it is going to increase to $260. So average time for processing a license is going to be 7 to 10 days, as long as you have a clean application. If you submit everything that is required and everything processes okay, no problems, 7 to 10 days on average. However, the exception to that rule is what I like to call licensure season. I would say that probably starts from May to maybe July, possibly August every year. And that's going to be when everybody is graduating school, not only dentists, but dental hygienists, AFDAs, anybody coming out of a program, and they're all going to be applying for licensure at the same time. So when you apply for a license, there are two types of categories. You can apply via examination or via criteria. If you take a board exam, you are going to be applying via examination. So that is going to apply to almost everybody. There are a few exceptions to the rule, but the majority of people are going to be applying via examination. So what you will need to apply for your license, you'll of course need to fill out the application and pay the application fee. You will need to have completed 3 hours of child abuse continuing education in order to apply for your initial license. After you apply for your initial license, it's only 2 hours to renew, but you'll need 3 initially to obtain your license. In addition, the program has to be approved by the Department of Human Services. And there is a full listing on the State Board of Dentistry's website where you can find a list of all those approved courses. Another thing that is very important when you are taking your child abuse continuing education, this is not only going to be for initial licensure, but for renewal as well. You will want to make sure that your information on your dental license and your information that you use to register for your child abuse course match exactly. So you'll want to make sure your name matches, your social security matches, that everything is going to be identical, because the program sponsor of your child abuse course is going to be responsible for forwarding verification to the State Board of Dentistry. It's a little bit different than some of the other continuing education courses that is basically the honor system. So if your information does not match up exactly, the State Board of Dentistry is not going to be able to connect the two. So it's very important that your information match. Of course, you will need to submit clinical exam scores. Those will need to be sent from the examination board directly to the State Board of Dentistry, with the exception of CDCA exams. The State Board of Dentistry has the ability to pull those from CDCA. So you will not need to do that with that particular exam. You'll of course need CPR certification. It needs to be infant, child, and adult certification, and you are not allowed to use an online course. It must be an in-person CPR course. You'll need to obtain a criminal history check. This is going to be for every state that you've worked or professionally trained in the past 10 years. What you can do instead, say that you have lived or worked in multiple states, and you don't want to take the time to do it for every single state. In lieu of that, you can just do a criminal history check for the state in which you are currently living, and then you can also do an FBI history check. That is an alternative. However, if the state that you are coming from is either California, Ohio, or Arizona, unfortunately, you don't have a choice. You have to obtain an FBI history check, because you are not able to send your information from the criminal history check to the State Board of Dentistry. So you have to do the FBI history check. You'll need to do a self-query from the National Practitioner Data Bank. You'll need to present a letter in good standing if you currently hold a license in any other state. You'll need to send a letter to the State Board basically saying that your license is in good standing. You'll need to send scores from your national examination. And you can do this by contacting the Joint Commission and requesting that they upload the scores to the online portal. You will need to have opioid CE for your initial licensure, regardless of whether or not you have a DEA registration. 2 hours must be in pain management or identification of addiction, and 2 hours must be in prescribing or dispensing of opioids. And you will actually have a full year after you get your initial license in which to complete this. You'll need a record of graduation sent directly to the State Board of Dentistry. You'll need a resume or curriculum vitae. And that is everything that you will need to apply for initial licensure in Pennsylvania. So I can take some questions now if anybody has any, or you can hold them to the end, whatever you would like to do.
Hi, I just have a quick question. So, if we are graduating in 2025, if we choose to do some CEs now that are on opioid things, would that count, or it has to be after we receive the license?
So if you do it now, they will not count. So any CE that you are going to use has to be obtained in the licensure period in which you are applying for your license. So if you're going to be applying in 2025, any hours that you would take starting April 1st, 2025, you could count, but anything before that date, you would not be able to use. So let's just say you're really ambitious and you're going to get your 4 hours as soon as you get off this webinar tonight. Those unfortunately will not count. You are going to need to wait till at least April 1st of 2025 to obtain those hours, since you are going to be applying for a license in 2025. Okay, I do see a question here in the chat box. Do out-of-state students have to get a Pennsylvania license along with the state they plan on practicing in? Would we only apply for the state we plan to practice in? No, you do not need to get a Pennsylvania license along with the state you plan on practicing in if you graduate from Pennsylvania Dental School. So if you graduate from, let's just say, Temple, but you're planning to go to Arkansas, I know that's a really random state, but Arkansas, and practice dentistry, you do not need to get a Pennsylvania dental license. You would only need to get a license for Arkansas or whatever state you plan to practice in. Another question that just popped up is, do you know how long it takes to get a license approved? In terms of going out of state, unfortunately, I do not. It's probably going to be dependent on whichever state you're going to, and however long it's going to take for that particular state. So, like I said, for Pennsylvania, if you have a clean application, you can expect 7 to 10 business days. Unless you're in licensure season, that's going to take a little bit longer. I imagine it is similar for other states, but I unfortunately cannot say that for certain.
I'm going to share my screen now here. Give me one moment so I can pull it up correctly. I am with the ADA Members Insurance Plans, and here we go. Okay, so I was just going to talk to you about how to kind of stay calm while you're going through these transitions, and I wanted to share a little bit with you about insurance, because in the postgraduate world, it's a little bit different than what you might be familiar with as you've maybe experienced it to this point. So, nothing's going for me now, guys. There it is. All right. But there are a couple of things I do want to share with you first, just so you have a better understanding. So one of the things that Amanda shared is that I work with the ADA and Protective Life, and they're actually two different things, right? Protective has actually been in the business of insurance for 117 years, and they were somebody who the ADA chose about 90 years ago, so that way we'd be able to put together plans specifically made for dentists. And so that's where I work, is at the ADA Members Insurance Plans, which is a business channel within Protective. So like you, we are well trained, we are focused, and we are deeply committed to this industry. So we have insurance plan specialists that are available to talk to you. And since we don't have as much time today as possible to go through a lot of the questions, I do want to make sure that I share information for you for her contact as well as my contact, in case we don't get through very many questions today. But I did just want to let you kind of know the relationship, because some people get a little bit confused there. Now, what we like to do is use CALM as a really easy to remember acronym. It's for 4 basic decisioning principles when it comes to your insurance options. So C is control what you can, A, ask questions, L, live your life, and M, make time for you. So you can't really predict the future, and of course that's what insurance is about. So what we believe is that doesn't mean you can't prepare for it, right? And so by following this calm outline, one of the things that you're going to be able to do is enjoy more of a peace of mind, both now and in the future. So as we consider the C, or the control what you can component to this, there are so many unknowns. For example, where am I going to work? Where am I going to live? How am I going to pay back my school loans? The licensure that you just saw that Kathleen went over, how do I get involved with that? There's many answers that you might not actually have right now. And so since you can't predict the future, you can plan for the unpredictable. And again, that's where insurance can help. So there are two things that the ADA helps to do with students primarily, and those include the life and disability insurance plan. So again, this component comes to controlling what you can, taking the time to understand it now, so that way you can plan for the future. The A is to ask questions, which as a student you are very well acquainted with. That little quote there says, we all fear what we don't understand. And in your case, it could be understanding how insurance works, maybe the options that you're supposed to consider, or even the questions you're supposed to ask. So because I only have a few things that I can share with you today that are really basic, again, I'm going to provide my contact information so that you have the ability to ask any other questions that you may have. But let's start with the basics of life insurance. This is what's going to cause you to have a tax-free lump sum that goes out to whoever you choose, which is known as your beneficiary, in the event of an untimely death. So one of the many common questions that I get, especially for students anyway, and then of course as you're transitioning into practice, is why would you need this now? And so of course it's an understandable question, and you can see here there's a couple of most common reasons that people might want to consider something as base coverage at this point. So first, none of us, again, know the future, so this kind of provides that peace of mind for you there. Second, I think we all hold liabilities. We have debt that we would much rather have erased if we were to die prematurely. And then you've got our loved ones, people that we might want to leave money to, whether that's like a partner or a spouse, could be kids, might even be parents or friends, siblings, something of that nature. These could be people that you just really feel committed to take care of, or maybe they're people who have taken care of you. But one thing I think that most all of us can relate to is the idea of final expenses. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people have to use a GoFundMe account to be able to get funds in order to take care of funeral expenses. And I'm sure you've seen that too. But not very many people are aware of just how expensive that can be. So life insurance can at least protect that at the very minimum. And plus, once you have coverage in place, it's a lot easier to keep it up to date, to be able to increase what responsibilities and commitments you take on over life. Transitioning into disability. So life insurance is for those you leave behind. That's for your loved ones. But disability insurance is actually for you. There's a monthly amount that will get paid out to you in the event that you are either injured or you have an illness to where you can't work anymore. And so because you are highly trained, you are going to have very unique and specialized skills, and therefore you have a tendency to be highly compensated. Now, because your skills are so specialized, what might be a very minor injury to somebody like me, say I sprained my wrist, that could be something that really prevents you from being able to practice. So of course, it's pretty important that you have some sort of coverage to protect that. Because one thing that we do know is that 1 out of 4 dentists become disabled at some point in their career. Unfortunately, we don't know which 25% of you that will be. So with that being said, your body, of course, is very important to your job, and so it's up to you to be able to protect that. And we consider a lot of factors when we determine what kind of coverage we want for life insurance. But with disability, it's pretty straightforward. As you're looking at these options, you might want to just consider about 60% of your income, but represent that on a monthly basis. So the example I like to give is if you've got $6,600 of gross income that you're receiving on a monthly basis, you're going to look at about a $4,000 benefit. So again, rule of thumb, 60%. Now, in the context of defining illness-related disability, it's really important to note that mental or nervous disorders can significantly impact people, especially people in a high-stress industry such as dentistry. And unlike a lot of competitors, Protective actually does not limit any of the mental illness-related disabilities. It's actually considered uncapped unless, of course, that disability is caused by substance abuse. Okay? So that's kind of a unique factor that the ADA is able to provide for you there. Let's go though to the L in Calm, which stands for Live Your Life. We have heard wellness as a concept that's continuously coming up more and more in homes across America. And in its heart, it's about adopting practices like exercising, eating well, just to help you live that better life. But living your life to the fullest is not strictly a physical component, right? It's about your mental and your financial well-being. So think about what you tell your patients, right? If they don't practice proper oral care, they risk more costly procedures in the future. Some can even end up with heart disease. So if you want to look at that kind of as a parallel for insurance, we are clearly a proactive protection. It happens to be able to prevent injury or illness from becoming a pretty catastrophic financial event. And the good news is that insurance is not all about protecting the what ifs of life. So a lot of dentists use insurance as a practical purpose. Life and disability insurance are both valuable tools that can be used to achieve personal and professional goals. I have a few listed here. These are just 3 of the most common ways that dentists use these as financial tools. So for those of you looking to at some point either purchase or even eventually expand a practice, you can use these as loan collateral, debt protection, which I'm sure most of you can relate to the idea of having student loans. And of course, we all have loved ones that we might want to leave a legacy to. Now, the M stands for make time for you. Put you first. Why? Because of everything that you've accomplished, you by far are your most valuable asset. So any good business person can tell you that you want to ensure your most important assets. So let me just talk with you about what's available to you now. If you are a student, if you're a D4, what you have right now, and then how that can actually be used to set you up for success after graduation. So hopefully you all have this coverage, but if not, I'm just going to share with you briefly what it is. All ADA student members have access to these plans. So when you became an ASDA member, I'm assuming that you are, you also became an ADA member at the exact same time. And that means that you get the advantage of taking advantage of these benefits from both organizations. And this benefit is life and disability insurance that's offered by the ADA members insurance plans, AKA paid for by them for you while you're in school. That means the entire time that you're in school, you can be protected at no cost to you. So real quick, looking at the screen here, the blue indicates life insurance, yellow being disability. So you'll actually have 2 policies. One is $50,000. That's a life insurance policy. Something happens to you, that would be paid out to your beneficiary. In addition to that, if let's say you passed away by a ski accident, a car accident, something that wasn't like a chronic illness, an additional $50,000 would be paid out to your beneficiaries. Now, most people in your age range don't pass away by those chronic illnesses, and that's why this was set up that way. But the disability, this is what's usually the most applicable, and that is the $2,000, that would be acting as that income I told you about, what you'd be able to get if you had an illness or an injury that prevented you at this point from attending classes like clinics, that sort of thing. These last column that you see there, that's really important too. Let's pretend that you broke your wrist, like I mentioned in the first example. That happens and your recovery takes like, let's just call it 9 or 10 months. Then at the 6-month mark, if you're not attending classes, you need to start beginning to pay your student loan. So this would be an additional $2,000, up to $2,000, to help go towards those loans. So while you're in school, you can see that that's extremely helpful, especially if something like that did happen to you. So again, these are the benefits you have access to right now. These are what you can have set up from the moment that you got into dental school. And if you go into residency or any kind of postdoc program, you can keep these. You just have to make sure that you sign up for them before you go into residency. Now, all of these benefits, whether you're graduating from dental school or whether you're graduating from residency, are good until December 31st of that graduation year. So if you didn't know these were available, or if you have never done it before, here's the QR code for you to be able to get advantage of these. They're going to ask you for some identifying information like your name, your school. If you don't have things set up already, then it will also ask you for your mailing address. That way we can send you the certificates in the mail. You'll get a package. You want to open that up and fill out your beneficiary form. You're also going to be prompted to set up an online account, which I would recommend, just simply so you have all that information available to you. Now, if you did just sign up, expect to get those policies in the mail that I mentioned in about 2 to 4 weeks. Now, I'll go back to that, but I really want to talk to you about, because most everybody here on this call is close to graduation, is what we term the graduate offer. So what happens after you graduate with the plans that you just enrolled in, or maybe that you've been enrolled in? Well, student coverage, it's covered for you by the ADA. I've mentioned to you that it expires December 31st, but you do have a means to be able to prepare and transition from your student coverage to what we would term more comprehensive member plans. That way you're just ready and set up for practice. So for those of you who are going into residency, like I said, you can keep what you have. It would be able to roll over and be extended. But for those of you who are going into practice, you would be able to keep your benefits. You would just need to set it up, because that December 31st, for those D4s that are on the call right now, it's December 31st of 2025, these will no longer be at no cost to you. You would need to set up payments. So let me share with you what that would look like. Now, your life and accidental death benefit both double to $100,000 in July of your grad year. So if you keep these plans, you'll be keeping that $100,000 as opposed to the $50,000 you had during dental school. For disability, you can still keep that $2,000 a month for that income component. And you can also choose to protect your student loan now and your office overhead later. What do I mean? Well, if you recall, I mentioned that as a student, you could receive that disability income and receive extra funds above and beyond your income in the event that you needed to start paying your school loan. Well, this is now what's called office overhead as you transition from a student. And what that allows you to do is to be able to pay either your student loan, because obviously you're going to have that when you're practicing, or office overhead. So let's just say there's a point where maybe you become disabled, you need to take advantage of this, and you don't have your student loan anymore, but you do own your own practice. So this extra income can go toward your office overhead expenses. And so that's an option that you have as well. Now, you certainly don't have to keep all 4 of these different plans that you're seeing here in that green box on your screen. You just have the option to. So you're also going to notice to the right a couple of premiums. These are examples for people who are 30 years old, both the male and female versions. You can see it's less than $40 a month to keep all 4, but again, you don't need to. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you're one of those people who are a planner, you just want to get things handled, you have the opportunity to do so. And just because you set up your conversion right now does not mean you have to pay for it right now, right? Why would we want to pay for something that we have available for us at no cost any sooner than we have to? So I will share with you how you can do that. You can set up auto pay to be able to set this up in a future date. That would be January for those D4s on the call, January 2026. But, if you're currently shopping for insurance, I would encourage you to reach out to us. That way we can just compare, show you where you'd be saving. That way you could ask all the questions. And as I mentioned, we are a resource only, so you won't have to worry about like a high pressure sale or anything like that. It's honestly just going to be a resource for you. So let me introduce to you who your experts are. I'm going to share with you 2 people. I am the first one. You'll notice I am your regional rep. So if you have been in dental school for a while, you may have seen me on campus. But we have what's called a plan specialist. And Brandy Shireen on the right there is who your go-to would be. She's who will be able to talk to you the most about all types of insurance plans that we have above and beyond what I just shared today. She is an expert in our entire suite of products, whereas I really focus on the student and the graduate offer. All right, so you can take down both of those numbers there if you need to. Now, real quick, just remember that as an ADA student member, you have benefits available to you while you're completing your dental education. But once you activate those, that's what makes you eligible for your graduate offer. That gives you that opportunity to sign up for the auto pay. You can have no gaps in coverage as you transition. And then, of course, probably as soon as you leave here, you might think of some questions to ask. So we have multiple ways for you to get a hold of us. Here's our website right here if you want to write that down. And as I mentioned before, here's the QR code again if you need it. But please keep your phones out because I've got 2 more QR codes to share in the next few moments that we wrap up. One of the things that we do on a continual basis every year is we do what's called our Next Steps survey. This is something that's offered to all D4s. The survey it allows us to understand what you're doing after you graduate. What that does is it allows us to administer your plans correctly. So I kept giving that example of those who might be going into residency. Well, this is what you can tell us. You can tell us what your program is and when your new graduation date is. That way we can extend that coverage. Maybe you're going into the military. Maybe you're going directly into a DSO. There's all types of things you could be doing. And whenever that is, allows us to share with you what your options might be. So once you're enrolled in that coverage and you've created your online account, you can take the Next Steps survey, which you can access immediately using this QR code. The reason there's a burrito on there is because you actually get a $10 Chipotle gift card just for filling out the survey. Takes less than 5 minutes to do. And then when you're completed, you'll be able to select submit, and that's when you'll get your e-gift with the Chipotle gift card there. And lastly, for those of you already enrolled, you will want to follow these steps. Contact your insurance plan specialist or me. Just review your options, learn more about the insurance. When I reach out to you, I will do so via email, and I'll provide for you a link that goes into the ins and outs of insurance, exactly what to look for, what kind of questions to ask. It goes through the Calm principles in a lot more detail, so that way you know what you're doing when you are shopping. But feel free to reach out to any of us so that way we can walk you through some of that. Of course, make sure that your online account is updated with any kind of postgraduate contact information so we can help you. And if you do decide to take advantage of the graduate offer, like I said, you can enroll with AutoPay. But what's going to happen is in December of the year you graduate, so again, all D4s here, that'll be December of 2025, there's going to be an invoice that comes in the mail. If you've already set up AutoPay, you can ignore it. If you haven't, you can actually use that to still sign up and determine what kind of coverage you want. Certainly welcome to do that on your own or reach out to us. But if you decide to throw that away and not keep it, nothing's going to happen except for that your plans are going to expire. So you have plenty of options there. Just want to make sure you're very clear on what to expect. So that's the QR code if you want any other additional information on that graduate conversion offer. And last but not least, I will just simply say, hopefully, you learned a few things about how to bring calm to the chaos and how we can help protect what matters most. So I do want to open that up for any kind of questions that you might have. All right, guys, thank you very, very much for your time today.
I'm Bijan. I graduated UPenn Dental in 2010. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about buying a practice. I went through two different transitions. First was a partnership, and the second was buying the entirety of the practice down the road. I associated with the practice I ended up buying in 2011. And I partnered with that in 2016. I was part-time at first. When you partner with somebody, if that's something some of you are looking into, I know there's a lot of graduating students here. You want to carefully consider that. There's got to be a pretty pressing why for the selling dentist. So you want to consider what's in it for both of you, and be cautious about the arrangement too. So for the initial transition I had in 2016, there was a broker for the partnership. A broker is kind of like a real estate agency selling a house. An alternative to a broker could be a CPA, particularly a CPA, an accountant that's specialized in dental practice transitions. You should be aware that typically CPAs or accountants, they're on a flat pay basis for the transition, whereas brokers are often, not always, but often on a commission basis. In other words, they have an incentive for the price to be higher. So one of the other things you should consider is that there are some brokers, won't mention any names, but some that offer dual representation, which means that, again, back to the analogy of the real estate agent, they would be representing both the buyer and the seller. There is a little bit of conflict of interest there, I think, and you should consider whether or not they could effectively advocate for both of you. Personally, I would advise avoiding dual representation. If there's a company that's handling a transition that you're considering, I would suggest getting a CPA to evaluate the deal as well. Typically, there's a valuation done. Valuation is just what's this practice worth in any given market. So some of it's location, some of it's the growth rate of the practice. Often the selling price ends up somewhere between 55 to 80% of the prior year's collection, or the average of the previous 3 to 5 years collection, somewhere in that ballpark. But it varies a lot based on a lot of different conditions. Typically, you're going to be engaging banks to acquire a loan unless you happen to have several hundred thousand or millions of dollars on hand, which most people don't. But so the banks typically they want to know a lot about you. They want to know all of your holdings, any spouse you have, what their holdings are. So they have to consider, just making sure you don't have an enormous amount of debt. You know, hold off on buying the fancy cars until later, because they are looking also at what your monthly expenses are. Also, I would recommend looking into multiple banks and having them compete against each other for offering you a good rate. Usually, like 2 to 3 banks would be a good idea. That's what I did, and it worked out pretty well. So, if those of you are possibly considering a partnership or an associateship, that's a path to partnership. You want to consider what are the terms up front. Are you comfortable with that? Do you think you'll be comfortable with it in the future? You want to look at, are you a majority partner? Or are you going to be a minority partner? What the pay scheme is as well. How are you be compensated? I could go on at length about this. There's a million and one things, but that's that you should consider for a partnership. So if you have more questions about that, you can send me an email. But also, when you're purchasing a practice, one of the big things you want to consider are accounts receivables. That is how much is owed to the practice that's outstanding from either insurance or patients that owe money. You have to pay attention to how that's allocated, and whether you'll have to be paying them after, or that if money is incoming, if you'll still owe money to the seller, or if that money will be accounted for in the transition. So you also want to consider how the sale price is allocated. So let's say you're buying a practice for $1 million. It's not as simple as just, okay, it's $1 million and I own the practice. There needs to be an allocation. Some part is going to go to goodwill, some part is going to go to equipment, et cetera, et cetera. There's a number of things that it goes, how it gets broken down. You will most likely be in a buyer position because you are all graduating. So as a buyer, you want to make sure or try to negotiate on the back end to get as much allocated to equipment as possible. That will benefit you, especially as you're getting started, because it will reduce your taxable income significantly in the first year. Section 179 is a deduction that it can go over $1 million, and that will reduce your taxable income in the first year significantly. So definitely something to consider as part of the negotiation. So I purchased the remainder of my practice this year, Ariel Dental up near Scranton, Pennsylvania, home of the office. In that time, we did no broker. Me and my former partners, we agreed on a price. We agreed on an allocation. We all had a pretty good sense of what it should be worth. So, yeah, you save some money from the commission or the brokers or the accountants. Still needed an attorney to draw up the paperwork. But it's definitely a little bit smoother of a way to go, I think, because everything was done at arm's length. But most acquisitions are not going to be without a broker. Just one tip I would also suggest when you're considering buying a practice, you would want to consider, is there room for expansion? So where can you improve upon what the current regime is doing? So are you going to be able to do things they don't? Or is it going to be possibly they do things you don't, in which case you want to consider that there may be a loss of revenue initially. Whereas if you purchase from, say, an older dentist that doesn't do a lot of the things that you're willing to do, there could be a lot of value creation and you're getting a large practice where there's a lot of untapped potential. So just something to think about. And that's about it. That's about all I have.
Hi everyone. I'm Dr. Selena Nguyen. I usually go by Dr. Selena. I graduated from Temple in 2020 in the COVID class. And I'll start with talking about CE. So when you join the ADA, so you move from ASDA to ADA, usually on signing day. Each school in Pennsylvania will have their own signing day. It's usually in the spring. When you sign up during that time, your first year and a half of membership is going to be free. It's complimentary. And so with that, you can get a year and a half of free unlimited CE courses through the ADA. And you can also get like complimentary or discounted CEs through PDA as well, whether it's from like the state level or it's from the local chapters. I've myself probably have had most of my CEs done through ADA or PDA. It really ranges in, or just has such a variety of different topics. So I've done my CPR through my local chapter. I've been certified through with a Botox and filler through the ADA, and have done like a workshop on clinical crown lengthening. So they have like a huge variety of courses that they can offer, whether it's hands-on or online. You can go to the next. Good. And then I'll like briefly touch on the journals that we have. We have the PDJ, which is a bi-monthly publication. I've written a few articles for it myself, but it's just a very nice, colorful journal that comes in the mail and keeps you in the loop of what goes on within the state. You'll see a lot of colleagues in there, a lot of cool events, a lot of ads too. So if you're looking for something in particular, you can probably find things there. A lot of different networking events as well. And then something more on the serious side, there's JADA. JADA is a monthly journal that also comes through the mail. Both of them you can also find on the websites for PDA and ADA. JADA is really cool. It's for keeping in the loop of what's going on in our field of dentistry. Our field is just ever changing, and so it's really good to be aware of new technologies, new like peer-reviewed research that comes out, just so that you can work your clinical skills to the best of your abilities and keep up with the gold standard. All right, my favorite part, networking events. So I am the president-elect of the Chester, Delaware County. So that local chapter is one of the larger ones in this eastern side of Pennsylvania, and all the local chapters have tried to put on really fun networking events. That way you can really feel connected with your community of colleagues, really expand your network of mentors, and just you really find like your own little dental community here. So in my local society in particular, we've had things like Top Golf. I'm currently planning one at the restaurant school. It's going to be like a little holiday banquet dinner. So it's just little things like that that help us feel like we're connected to our profession more than just what the work is. There are in-person CE events, and we recently had for the last 2 years a vacation CE down in Cambridge, Maryland, which has been really fun. I went 1 year. Last year it was actually sold out, and you can do your CEs in the morning and then enjoy like a pina colada by the pool in the afternoon and have a really nice dinner at night with really good seafood there. In terms of in-person CE events, there are many of the local chapters, or even just the Pennsylvania, like the PDA, will have their own in-person CE events. I'm going to do a little shameless plug for the New Dentist Committee. So I'm chair of the Pennsylvania New Dentist Committee, and this past year we had a in-person CE/social event at Hershey Park. And this upcoming year, something to look out for is we're going to have 3 more regional social events that also will offer CE as well. So we try to make it really fun with the CE events, and of course, it's good networking too. Every year, we have Pennsylvania Dental Meeting. That location changes depending on the year. This upcoming year is going to be in Malvern, so more along the east of Pennsylvania. And that's usually a 2-day meeting. The first day is more CE focused. And then the second day is more kind of like business meeting, networking, and kind of keeping in the loop of big events and big members in the spotlight for our state. My absolutely favorite one is the ADA SmileCon. So, in the 4 years that I've been out of school, I've been to the SmileCon every single year. That location also changes every year. So, my first year out, it was in Las Vegas, which was very fun. Then it was in Houston, Orlando, and this past, actually last month, it was in New Orleans. It is probably the annual meeting that I do most of my CEs in, even though it's just for a weekend. But the variety of CEs that are offered have just been really good and super high quality. So I've always been really happy there. And of course, exhibit hall is great to get free stuff, just like how as the meetings are and other exhibit halls are. Um, the last thing I want to talk about is the PDA Connections and Mentoring Program. This is where you can have, as a dental student or even as a new dentist, you can request a mentor who could also be a new dentist, but usually is a more seasoned dentist. And you can be matched with someone who is in like your similar area, type of practice that you're looking to go into or already in, or by specialty. I know last time that I checked on this program is that we have way too many mentors and not enough mentees. So there are just so many eager dentists that are looking for someone to mentor and really are extending their hand out to help. Because that's really what this dental community is all about. So there's a little link there that you guys can go into and just take advantage of that.
Okay, thank you. There were some pre-submitted questions, so we'll go over those first. One of them was, are there any shadowing opportunities? So through the Connections Mentoring Program, you can shadow a dentist if you're interested in that. Somebody asked about job opportunities for working post-grad. On our YouTube channel, we have a webinar called Career Paths 2024. You can just search it by typing Pennsylvania Dental Association into YouTube. But that one really deep dives into different career paths you can take. Best way to find dentists who are looking to hire. So on our site, padental.org, if you scroll down to the bottom and click on classified ads, you can then go to opportunities available, and there's a bunch of listings around the state for people looking to hire. And then someone was wondering about understanding job offers, collections and production and daily and base salary. So there's another webinar that we have done, and it will be happening again this spring, but it's called Associate Agreements and Contracts. That's on our YouTube as well. So if you have any interest in those, feel free to go to our YouTube and check those out. So someone did ask, how long does getting credentialed with insurances take typically? Davinia, if you're there.
I am here. So it depends. If you are going to be doing the application, the full process, going through underwriting, then it can take anywhere from 4 weeks up to 12 weeks. Now, with what I was referring to with that conversion, you don't have to go through any of that. That's something that's considered a guaranteed issue. In other words, no matter what your medical history is, no matter where you're at in terms of like family history, none of that matters. You'll just be able to get it simply by raising your hand and saying you want it. If you wanted additional, if you needed more coverage than what that's offered there, then yes, you'd have to go through that underwriting, which is what's called full underwriting when you go through that process that I mentioned. So a lot of that really depends on how long it takes them to get information from your doctor. They have what's called the Medical Information Bureau that they access. It's a national database where they get all of your information. They look at your doctors and then they see who do they need to talk to. And as you'll learn very, very soon while you're in practice, the first people on your mind are not those requesting medical records. Instead, they're the patients in front of you. So that has a tendency to elongate some of that. And of course, a little bit of what was being discussed earlier about purchasing a practice. A lot of times they're going to be looking at potentially your finances. So they might have to get some of that information from you. And then, of course, it depends on how long you're willing to postpone a medical exam. So again, it depends. So if you just want what I mentioned, just that graduate conversion offer, it's as quickly as you decide that you want to set that up. Otherwise, it can take as short as 4 weeks and up to 12.
Okay. How do you transition your license when moving to other states, or what are the additional requirements?
So that is really going to depend on what state you are looking to move to or relocate to. So if you, let's just say you get licensed in Pennsylvania and you want to get licensed in, say, New York or Maryland, one of our neighboring states, it tends to be a little bit easier. The requirements are fairly similar. So that is going to be a little bit easier of a transition for you. If you're looking to relocate to a state such as Florida, it's going to be much more difficult. And that's just due to the requirements that are in some of the other states. So if you are looking to transfer your license, if you got a Pennsylvania license, you're looking to transfer it to another state, you'll really want to contact that state board of dentistry and find out exactly what their requirements are before you go about applying for that.
Okay. What is the most important thing to first consider when we graduate in terms of finances and or paying back loans?
You chime in here if you want. I always emphasize budgeting. It's really important, and delaying gratification. So I'd also recommend people pay their loans at an accelerated rate. Um, you have to make a call as to whether or not you want to prioritize higher interest loans versus potential investments that could pay off bigger. That's a consideration too. But in general, my objective was to get rid of it a little bit more quickly and budget accordingly. So and literally write out the budget. Very important.
Okay. And then is there any opportunity in federal organizations?
So I work at a FQHC, which is a federally qualified health center in North Philadelphia. And there are so many opportunities in the public health realm of dentistry. We truly are the safety net of the healthcare system, especially in dental. So there's always a huge need to be able to serve the underprivileged, underserved populations. So many opportunities. I found my job interestingly through the PDA because my dental director was also a part of the PDA and we just met at a networking event. But I know that other colleagues have found it through, for example, Indeed or other job listings, classified ads. So there's always an opportunity to get in there. And I would definitely recommend it, especially if you are thinking about going back to like the loans. I know loans are a really huge topic nowadays with dental students, and luckily, being a part of public health will help you be able to be enrolled in loan repayment programs. So I can definitely put in the chat like my email if anyone wants to reach out to me if they have questions or are interested in being in the public health realm.
Okay, are there any additional questions for our panelists today? You can either unmute or type them in the chat now.
I also thought I'd mention that our office is hiring. So if any of your graduates here are looking for a position, feel free to send me a message. I'll put my contact in here as well. Thank you.
And if there are no additional questions, I do want to say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you so much to our panelists for putting on a great presentation with lots of very important information. And if anyone has any questions for me as well, you can reply to the email that I send out tomorrow. I'll be sure to include everyone's emails here tonight so you can reach out to them as well if you think of anything later on. So, alrighty, everyone have a wonderful night then.